So I have some extra credit for you on the next test, and it has to do with what I'm about to say now. So when I first constructed example 2, I did not manifest enough intellectual carefulness and intellectual attentiveness. And um, in doing the examples for the similarity and the difference, I misrepresented who said what. I said, from the standpoint of Daphne, that she said things that Jennifer actually said in the example that you see that you downloaded for example 2. And as Daphne, I said that Jennifer said things that Daphne actually said. So I had to redo it. And so I just want to call your attention to the fact that your professors, like me, we make mistakes. We're not saying that we do things perfectly all the time, but we're here to challenge you and challenge ourselves to do as well as we can to strive for excellence as much as we can, given our busy lives, given our constraints and whatnot. Um, Another thing that I want to detail is that when I am creating these examples, I do draw from actual arguments that real students have submitted in the past, but then the examples of how to do a similarity paragraph and how to do a difference paragraph, those are created by me. So the original constructions by me. And again, they are aspirations, they are outstanding examples. To get to that level, but probably even just to get a B, requires lots of intellectual perseverance. So remember, intellectual perseverance has to do with the awareness of the need and ability to harness all of one's psychological and physiological resources to work through complex, challenging cognitive tasks. So when I am constructing these examples, each paragraph, just to get kind of a good draft, is going to take me 30 to 45 minutes. And then it's going to take me at least another 30 to 45 minutes to really polish it. There's going to be editing. What you see is not something that just comes out, out of my mind perfectly. I often delete things that I wrote before, and then I rewrite things. I might decide that the focus I was going for, what I thought I was going to say, isn't going to quite work, the angle that I was going to take. So there are all kinds of things behind the scenes that you don't see from the examples. But I want you to keep that in mind. Michael Jordan um, once told some players, I think it was in a commercial, that that maybe he ruined the game because when it comes to new people who want to become athletes, because he says, you saw me in my prime, you saw me at my best, you saw me, during my performance time, and in my performance time. Well, yeah, you might think I'm great and I'm wonderful, but what you don't see is all the work that goes behind what it took for me to become a great basketball player. So the same thing here. Each of the paragraphs, each of the examples you see took a lot of time. One example with 2 paragraphs probably takes me 2 to 3 hours by the time I get it to you. So you can imagine that if it takes me that much time, it's definitely going to take you at least that much time. But keep in mind that you should expect to make mistakes. You should expect to struggle with this. That's how we build new brain cells. Our brain doesn't grow and become more intelligent and hence make us smarter by doing the same kind of task that we can already do. Rather, research shows that because learning is physiological change that's created in the brain, it's when we are challenged with new opportunities, new problems, new tasks, that we create new brain cells. And these brain cells are then forced to make new connections. And that's the part that can hurt. And that's what you're doing when you're doing this activity. So this is normal. And I want you to be okay with it. All right. So the extra credit comes in because I want you to, in the test, or actually at the end of your assignment, at the end of the task 3 for unit 3, I would like for you to rate yourself in terms of intellectual perseverance. So go back to the unit 2 lecture I did on intellectual perseverance, create 1 paragraph. In that paragraph, tell me how you would rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being I hardly reflected in it, intellectual perseverance, 5 being I rocked it. Tell me why you gave yourself that number. Quote the definition, the official definition from the intellectual perseverance lecture I did during Unit 2, and then embed words from the definition and from the bullet points below the definition to explain what in the definition or in the bullet points you manifested or reflected or failed to manifest or reflect while you were working through the task 3 assignment for unit 3. Now, if you want to, you could talk about how you reflected some aspects and speak to that. and how you didn't reflect some aspects. One thing I want you to keep in mind is that you need to insert actual details of you actually working through this task. So give a little bit of context. What was the task that you were working with? What were you expected to do in this task? At what point during the task did you find yourself really having to reflect some element of intellectual perseverance? Or at what point did you find yourself not really reflecting some aspect of intellectual perseverance? So I say this because in extra credit submissions in previous tests that students do where they self-assess, they don't provide enough details with respect to the context. Okay, so that said, there's the extra credit, and I just made that up. So now we're going to go ahead and get into example 2. So this is example 2. The performance outstanding is A level. Grade, it would be 90 to 100 points. Argument is reasoning for a definite conclusion with opposing conclusions supported in the respective arguments. So by that, I don't mean that one argument has two conclusions in it that oppose each other. Rather, I'm saying the discussion involves an argument with a conclusion. For example, it is the case that A as a conclusion, and another argument with a conclusion that opposes that one. So that student might say, it's not the case that A. The word count for the comparative paragraphs only is about 624 words. Notice here that again, I say the word count and hence example does not include steps 1 or 2, nor the question paragraph you learn about in task 3B. Again, as I pointed out in the previous video, I actually do present step 2. Just keep in mind that I don't include the missing requirement from the salutation to step 2, nor do I include in this example the missing requirement from step 2 to step 3, and I certainly don't include the component B of task 3. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead and look at this paragraph. I'll probably have to do 2 or 3 videos to really walk you through this example. All right. So sometimes students think that, hey, if I'm going to use an argument where we have different conclusions or our reasons focus on different things, I don't see how I have anything to work with. And this is a great example, and even the first example shows you the possibilities of that. But here I'm really going to emphasize how you can, even if you have opposing conclusions, still find stuff to talk about in terms of similarities and difference. And this will be really highlighted by the second paragraph. So let's go ahead and focus on this one. So one thing that our arguments have in common, albeit for opposing conclusions, regards our attention to scientific inquiry. Okay, so we see here that they're going to focus on something they have in common. So there's another word that you can use in your first sentence to let me know that you're going to focus on something that is alike or similar. So notice that you have at least 3 different words that you can use in your first sentence. You can tell me that you're going to focus that you have on something you have in common, something that is similar, show how something compares to say that something's similar, or you can use the word alike. You're going to show how, in what way the reasoning is alike in your responses. Notice how they say that they give the gist of what they're going to focus on in terms of a similarity or what they have in common. They say attention to scientific inquiry. Again, you should not be getting into the actual discussion or support in your first sentence. Your first sentence is a kind of conclusion that you are going to be arguing for. They just give the gist of what they will be focusing on in arguing for the claim or the implicit claim that there is something in common between the 2 responses. We see this when I cite how, comma, quotation mark, so they do a really good job introducing quoted material from their own response. I see that they're going to focus on what they say, and they do so in a way that fluidly embeds the definition. There have been various tests, studies, and experiments that have tried to prove these claims to be true. Oh, by the way, there are warnings and tips and missing requirements that I go over in the videos for example 1. So you do have to watch the videos for example 1 to get missing requirements. If you watch only this video or only this video and any others I might post, then you're not going to have all of the information you need. So make sure you listen to those other videos, the ones that come before this. All right, so then the speaker writer, we're going to say Daphne. Okay, so in this example, Daphne is speaking to Jennifer. She says, in your argument, we see this when you say, and so by this, she's referring back to attention to scientific inquiry. Again, we see this. Again, what? Attention to scientific inquiry. Notice how coherent and pulled together everything is. In your argument, we see this when you say to prove something is true, research and experiments would need to be completed. All right, so far we see excellent attention to the expectations that I went over in a different set of videos. The claim is being made in bold that will be supported. They're starting with the similarity. Next, they move into their evidence from each response. Their quotes in quotation marks fluidly embedded. So far, they're doing a great job. Remember, you can't just plop down a quote. You have to embed it in a fluid manner and whatnot. Okay, so then we have, I think that your use of research in your statement captures not only what we both refer to with the word experiments, but also with what I'm referring to when I use the words tests and studies. So notice how, and I didn't stress this in the previous videos in example 1, but notice the language. I, we, you. You are speaking to your peer. You are trying to convince them of something, the thing that is in bold. Even if something is implied, one thing that philosophers are into is making things explicit. So I really want you to tease out the connections. Another thing that I didn't stress is notice how in example 1 and then continue to notice in example 2 of how to do a compare and a contrast piece, how you never see any language that I told you not to have that is in a prior set of videos explaining the generic, the generics of this assignment. I said that I should not see you saying anything like, I agree with you, I disagree with you, or, I agree with what you say in your argument. That's not what this is about. Never should I see agree or disagree in any of your language, in any of your paragraphs for this assignment. It is a text-based analysis. It's if you've taken a literature class, it's like a literary analysis. You're focusing on what are in the words, but it's in first person with respect to an argument that a peer made. So also, you don't see any judgment or evaluation. You didn't see that in the first example. You will not see that in the second example. So there's nothing about like you provide a good argument, your argument is interesting. We don't want any of that kind of thing. And you also see that they're not focusing on trivial stuff. There's nothing about you follow the instructions, we start with the conclusions, we're both focused on this topic. That's trivial stuff. I already went over that. So I'm just reminding you briefly. Okay, so now then they say, hence there are some grounds for saying that we both show attention to activities humans can or have engaged to determine the truth of some concern, topic, or problem, including things like viruses and pandemics. Okay, so let's really get into what has and has not been achieved here. So here they say that I have some grounds. In other words, I think I've given you some reasoning, some good support in here for drawing a conclusion. And the conclusion is we both show attention to activities humans have or can have engaged in. So we both show. So they're focusing on how they have something in common. Even if Jennifer didn't use words like test and studies, that's okay. You might be saying, but isn't she pointing out something different? She is. She's pointing out something that she did do that Jennifer didn't do, but that's not the focus of using those words. The focus of using these words is what? To show attention, to show that they both have something in common, attention to certain kinds of activities. But notice that with this conclusion right here, which happens to be a minor conclusion in her argument about the arguments, she has not yet linked her evidence in quotes to what? That they both show attention to scientific inquiry. So she's still going to go on to do that. Also notice that in the paragraph how, all of the work that occurs for most of your score for this entire task is here in blue. Sometimes I have students submit things and they have a lot less. So sometimes students submit things and they only have maybe one sentence, maybe two sentences. That's at best going to get you a D or a C. And so you want to be thinking about like what I said before, the executing steps 1 and 2 of task 3A should comprise no more than 25 to 30% of your paragraph if you're going for that A-level response, right? So that means 75 to 66 or 67% should be focused on unpacking, defending, elaborating explicitly and directly how your evidence supports what you say in bold.